Uh, International Human Rights Commission Relief Fund Trust, which is having a special consultative status with the United Nations Economic and Social Council from 2016. World Youth Summit for Peace organization, which is responsible and holding and hosting youth summits after every 2 or 3 years. Uh, I welcome all of you, Your Excellencies, youth leaders, and the leaders of masses. I would call it everybody is now the leader of masses on behalf of International Human Rights Commission. Uh, I'm not taking much time. I'm not going to give any speech at this moment because we are already wasted a time. The floor is given to His Excellency, His Excellency Roselia Artgiza, the first ever female president of the Ecuador. She is educationist and she is the one of the finest female leader in Ecuador. And floor is with you, Madam President.
Thank you very much, dear Ambassador Mohammed Shahid Amin. Thank you for the invitation. I'm happy to see each other now that we already fixed the connection.
Thank you,
and it's good to see everybody. My greetings to all the excellencies.
Sorry to interrupt you, Madam President. We are paying for the Zoom webinar and they were not happy. They converted into the Zoom meeting. Then they... But anyway, this is happening. This is a business. They are doing it. So...
Yeah, it happens sometimes with the connections in every place. Well, it's good to see face to face to all the former presidents, former prime ministers and authorities from different parts of the world. I think more than ever, it is necessary to think about human rights and how we can build a more democratic and equitable world, especially for new generations. And I want to focus my intervention talking about how we can protect democracy, how we can improve the quality of life of people in our countries, in the whole world. As Ambassador Mohammed says, we are facing big challenges now, not only because the pandemic situation, but also because the inequality on the distribution of the resources inside the countries and in between the different countries. Nowadays, for example, in the different countries, we are trying to find the ways how the vaccine can be distributed all around the world in an equitable way, because most of the people that are vaccinated now, they are in very wealthy countries, but countries like my country, Ecuador, and others, it's such a difficult process to access to the vaccine process. And I said it like a preamble, like an introduction, because I want to focus more the attention and in what's happening in the world that make very hard, sometimes impossible, to achieve the SDG goals or the goals that we like humanity want to achieve. And I think that we have a kind of sickness, a cancer against democracy. Two main issues that I want to remark. One is poverty, the inequality that make that a lot of people have nothing, almost nothing, and other people have too much. The inequality is against the democracy process. Why? Because people think that having a dictatorship or having a person that have all the power, it can be fixed. And then the temptation of populism or neo-populism is very, very strong, especially in countries like in Latin America that I know better than other countries. And the other situation, the other cancer, the other situation against democracy is corruption. And corruption is all over the world. And we see that even in this pandemic situation, some people are making money with corruption. corruption in hospitals, in vaccine processes, and how to arrive to the power. And when people get to the positions, they want to privilege himself or herself and the surrounder. Then we have to fight against these cancers. Because when we think about the pandemic, we say, okay, in some time we are going to be successful against this. But what happens with corruption, that it seems to be like endemic in the world? And we have a lot of scandals of corruption all around the world. How we can fight to this pandemic, the pandemic of corruption? And I strongly believe that we have some ways, and I want to make some proposals. One is about education. We have to educate people in values, in ethics. And of course, it is a process. You cannot get it from now to tomorrow. It's impossible. But we must improve the quality of our education. And we have to work very hard to put in the curricula of the schools, especially elementary schools, but also secondary schools, also universities, this curricula of values, talking about the values that are all over in different parts of the world since a long time ago, like to respect the others, to respect the life of the others. We are here talking in an event organized by an international organization of human rights. Then human rights is part of the values that we have to instillate, to put into the education, in the formal education. That's one way. That it takes time, it takes, but it's the more safe and secure way to arrive to our goals. Another issue is how we can get this correct way of proceeding of authorities or from different levels. We have to have in any country a framework of law, and we have to respect the law. Law has to be for everybody, not applying the law and putting the laws only for the poor people or the people that is not in government is a big mistake. And we have to fight that the law is forever, that it's not going to be some people out of the law, what's happening, especially with political classes in our countries. And the other thing that we have to work very hard is to show it by example. We are leaders here. We are talking in between leaders, and we have to show the others that we are in the capability to demonstrate a right way to proceed, how we can act, because we have more visibility than other people through the media, through the different ways now, through the social network, and we have to prove that we are really in right position, and we have to demonstrate these human values that has to be with the honorability, with the correction, not corruption, etc. Then my proposal is that we can work on these fields to achieve the goals, to have a better, more democratic and equitable world. Myself, I'm out of politics since long time ago. I decided to work more in the field that I love from the bottom of my heart, that's education. And I continue working with teachers in my country and all around Latin America and Ibero-American. I work also in a school of leaders, from young leaders to my country, trying to instillate, to focus in all these values that I am talking about. Then we try to do the best that we can do in terms of proposals, in terms of teaching, in terms of training. And I hope we can share all these ideas and maybe join efforts in different parts of the world to achieve these goals and to face these challenges that we have. I did not talk about other challenges that are so important, like climate change, like how to fight poverty and others, because it will take too much. And I know that we have to hear all the proposals here, but my proposals is from the side of education, fighting corruption to achieve this democratic and equitable world that we want to build. Thank you very much.
Your Excellency President, thank you very much for your valuable time, and obviously it's a need of a time that we have to invest in education to educate our society, because the way forward for strengthening the democracy and the institution is that we have to invest in coming generation education. I would like to request Excellency President that this webinar, this summit is making a recommendation for the international institution. And most important that you are an educationist, not only a leader, you are an educationist, and you are giving a way forward to the coming generation and a present generation too. I would like to request you that on the education, if you will be as a participant, as the keynote speaker of this summit, it will be my request to the all leaders that they had to give us some suggestion in writing, so that we will compile it and we will make it that document as a printed document to distribute to the all international institutions and to the all governments, so that the governments can also get the our contribution to strengthen the system, and to especially the education system, our democratic system, to deal the economic system. I mean, all kind of participants today are here, and it is my humble request, although my organization will also make some recommendations, but it is my request to all valuable and honorable dignitaries that while they are speaking, they have to put few suggestions with their signatures and send to me via WhatsApp or via email, so that we will compile it as an international document to give it to the Excellency Secretary General of the United Nations, Antonio Guterres. He is a very instrumental person at this moment, and I have seen it after many years, a very instrumental Secretary General of the United Nations. So let us to strengthen him while he is in office. Let him to move forward for the humanity and for the peace and prosperity of this world, and we have to contribute our efforts in his efforts, so that the international institutions should be get more strengthened to implement the universal agenda for humanity and for the people and for this planet. Excellency President, thank you very much, and thank you very much for your valuable time. Now, I would like to introduce Excellency Professor Dr. Emil Constance. So, he's the third president of Romania. He's the founder of International Academy of Culture and Diplomacy, and he is the one of the most distinguished speaker, advisor into the many institutions. Excellency President, the floor is yours, sir.
We cannot hear you, President Constantinescu.
Excellency President, you have to unmute. Unmute, yes.
Yep.
Nu s-a auzit?
Yeah,
Yes.
now it is.
Yes, now
O iau de la început?
Mai încercat odată.
Your Excellencies, Mr. Ambassador, thank you for the floor. S-aude?
Da. Go. Mergeți.
yes, Mr.
I am glad to attend this event and engage in a debate. Nu s-aude?
Stați un pic.
Saudi?
Yes,
I am
Mr.
glad to
President.
attend this event and engage in a debate organized by the International Human Rights Commission. It is this very subject that of human rights that I would like to address in these particular times produced by the COVID-19 pandemic. Even before the pandemic, the issue of human rights has been a sensitive one. It is a fact that the COVID-19 was exploited by authoritarian regimes to their best advantage. Human rights and democracy are vulnerable in the time of crisis, especially during the pandemic, which was used as a pretext to increase governmental control. The many states of emergency imposed all throughout the world were both a protector and an enemy to human well-being. It was a forced home arrest and forced to prevent the spread of the disease, but also a shelter to be able to perform various abuses against migrants or national minorities. Even more, it was an umbrella for authoritarian regimes to act according to their wishes and enforce regulations that would have not otherwise been implemented democratically. There are different perceptions of human rights. What we feel to be important for us, freedom of speech, movement, the protection of personal lives, and our property fades in the eyes of those who are denied access to water, sanitation, medication, who are constantly persecuted and abused for being part of the national minority. To them, these are veritable human rights that are infringed. And it is all the more tragic because the pandemic veered our view from them to the peril of the disease and the rush for a vaccine. Yet the peril of the disease is stronger in those areas of the world where people do not have access to basic commodities such as water, food, and medicine. And the vaccine is pointless to them since it was not yet, which is again a shock, reached their areas. I would like to take a moment to highlight that as far as I am concerned, human rights are not a mere theoretical issue, but a life experience. My adolescence and adult years were lived under communist dictatorship, in which it was possible at any time to be arrested, sent to foreign. Hundreds of thousands of people underwent this tragic experience in my country, among whom were people who were close to me or even family members. We conquered our freedom by popular rebellion, during which the repression forces killed thousands of people, shot or run over by military tanks. However, this rebellion had not been possible in the absence of the debate of human rights generated by the Helsinki Agreement. When discussing human rights, we do it in terms of numbers. But people should not be just another statistic, as they are alive human beings who need to be perceived in their entirety, physical, moral, and spiritual. This is a major issue that we need to address nowadays. People not as numbers, but as human beings. Human rights are among the issues that have been left in the background during the pandemic, and this did not solve them, but rather got them worse. In addition to that, we as leaders of the world, decision makers and scholars, have failed to see that an attack on human rights is also an attack on human dignity. Our present phases of our present world faces a series of paradoxes. Underdevelopment does not exclude arming. Democracy does not eradicate corruption. And market economy fails to prevent ecological disasters and unemployment. 50 years after it was adopted, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights is systematically defied, either on ideological pretext or under the endemic burden of poverty. We live in a more or less the same 21st century world, thanks to international law and by virtue of technological progress. We will not really have a dialogue until we live in the same type of time. But in order to stand before one another with our particular affinities and needs, it is necessary to establish a universal consensus referring to those moral values that protect not only each community, but also each person. How could we initiate a real dialogue to discover it? If we cannot always perceive the common good, it seems to me more reasonable to begin with identifying the common harm. It is in the interest of all nations to meet on the same ground in order to reject what they all reckon to be intolerable. I am confident that everyone here refuses from the very beginning the idea of war, terrorism, torture, pollution, crime of opinion, xenophobia, racism and genetic manipulation, exploitation of children, social exclusion, hunger, professional discrimination on sex, religion, or ethnic affiliation. We have the duty to diagnose together these diseases so that we can heal together the wounds that they continue to make. In the fight against COVID-19, we are attempting to be resilient. The resilient we are built today as a response to violations is not just for today, but for tomorrow as well. And along with this resilience, we need to enforce a zero-tolerance policy against abuses to our basic rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency President. You are really, in my opinion, I have heard you in many conferences. Although I was scheduled to travel to the institute, one of your institute conference, but unfortunately the COVID has stopped us to travel. I wish that I will invite you in Pakistan and all leaders, those who are sitting virtually with us, to Pakistan to have an hospitality of Pakistan, to see the culture and tradition of my country. Although my country is labeled as an supporter of the terrorism, 200 million people of Pakistan are a peace lover, but obviously, as you mentioned, that the racism, xenophobia, and human rights violation, democracy shows us a fragility. Human rights are in question still in the 21st century. We are not on the level that we accept that the human rights are fully implemented. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which has been passed in 1948, still having no implementation in many countries. Even the developed countries are also facing the same problems which the underdeveloped countries are facing on the issue of human rights, because of the inequalities, because of the gender discrimination, because of the racism. You are absolutely right, Mr. President, and we have to strengthen our collective efforts to save our humanity and humans for this disaster, because this will be a very biggest disaster for the whole humanity that the humanity will stand on the verge of collapse if we are not moving forward to strengthen our coordinated efforts on an institutional basis and on an individual basis. It is our responsibility. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your valuable time. And I hope that the next time, inshallah, I will look forward you in person to speak in front of the thousands of the pupils and thousands of the youth of the world. Thank you very much, Mr. President. Now I am introducing Her Excellency, first female president and sixth president of Mauritius, Dr. Amina Firdaus Oreb Fakim. Madam President, the floor is yours.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Excellency. Can you hear me?
Yes, Excellency President, we are hearing you.
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you, Excellency.
Yes. Excellencies, distinguished guests, fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank His Excellency Dr. Shahid Amin Khan for associating me with this event. Discussion on human rights must remain constant in our discourse and forever alive in our thoughts and in our actions. Human rights are of importance in themselves and should never be instrumentalized or weaponized. They are essential to advance peace, human dignity, to empower women and girls, to promote sustainable development, and more importantly, to spark hope. Ladies and gentlemen, the rights of every human being are enshrined in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and have become a template for building resilience and preventing crises. Diplomacy needs to be empowered to promote human rights. The primary responsibility to uphold and champion human rights rests with government, and every measure must be taken to help ease tensions, deliver sustainable development, and sustain peace. Organizations like the UN has a review mechanism to highlight the realities on the ground. But when will it have an even stronger mechanism to hold those members to account? Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, every day we read about human rights struggles on my continent in Africa, but I remain convinced that human rights inspire and drive progress. To make a lasting impact, however, it must become part of the DNA of each one of us. Whilst there are few successes around the globe, we have to be honest to recognize that human rights agenda are losing grounds in many parts of the globe, but still, one must not lose hope. There are troubling trends, no doubt, but we are all also witnessing powerful movements for human rights and social justice. Black people, youth, indigenous people, migrants, and refugees are demanding their rights and making their voices heard. Journalists are fearlessly getting the stories out in spite of many losing their lives on the battlefields. Women are bravely standing up and saying, "Me too." Ladies and gentlemen, more and more people are speaking out about cultural rights and how important they are for protecting the diversity of beliefs and practices. Recognizing these rights are essential for our common heritage. Greater recognition must be given on ensuring the rights for persons with disabilities. Even scourges like terrorism can only be fought when human rights are upheld. 1 billion people, ladies and gentlemen, have been lifted out of extreme poverty in just one generation. More than 2 billion people have gained access to improved sanitation and improved drinking water sources. The mortality rates for children under 5 has declined by almost 60%. It is in this overall context of progress and concern that I want to focus on a few human rights challenges as I scan the global horizon. The understanding that underpins this effort reflects the indivisible and interdependent nature of civil, political, economic, social, and cultural rights. Excellencies, let's begin with women, those who hold up half the sky. In every continent, women have been elected to lead and occupy key positions in government. Gender gaps in education are closing around the world. Maternal mortality has dropped by nearly half, but still much remains to be done. Untold women and girls still face insecurity, violence, and other violations to their rights every day. COVID-19 has revealed and exposed many such violations. Doors of economic opportunity remain closed, glass ceilings abound. Let's never forget gender equality remains a question of power. At present trends, it will take 2 centuries to close the gap in economic empowerment. I do not accept a world that tells my daughter that economic equality can wait for another 100 years. I know you agree. Our world cannot wait. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in every corner of the globe and on the internet, civic space is decreasing. Activists and journalists are being targeted by surveillance, misinformation campaigns, and with threats of violence. The immediacy and reach of online threats pose serious challenges to those who wish to speak up. Cyberspace has become the next frontiers for bullying, and technology is being misused for undue surveillance and interference with free speech and shrinking the space for dialogue. The downside is that human rights defenders, media workers, environmentalists, and journalists have been killed in the last few years. Culprits must be prosecuted. Respect for human rights is just a game of words if there is no respect for people. We must work towards to close the gap in discriminatory laws and practices that target the people in the working place, in accessing public services, or in communities simply because of their sexual orientation, religion, or gender identity. Excellencies, we are seeing a huge spike in xenophobia, racism, and intolerance. Hate speech is a menace to democratic values, social stability, and peace, and unfortunately, it's moving mainstream and in conspiracy theories. It is abetted by public discourse that tends to stigmatize women, minorities, migrant, refugees, and any so-called the other, those who pray differently and those who look different. Political parties and leaders are cutting and pasting these ideas into their own propaganda and electoral campaigns. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, poverty is a denial of human rights. It is a fact that our world since the 1990s has achieved remarkable progress in fighting extreme poverty and lifted millions out of absolute poverty. Yet today, the benefits of economic growth are unevenly shared. Inequality is growing within and among countries. Recent figures tell us that 8 richest persons on this planet collectively own more than 50% of the poorest. Sharp increases in inequality not only limits economic growth, they are also the recipe for instability and discontent, and social media is only enabling this disparity. Ladies and gentlemen, the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development Goals are our contribution to a fair globalization and clearest blueprint for realizing the rights of all. The greatest challenges facing the world of today and tomorrow is climate change. It will soon make the current pandemic look like child play. This threat has a clear pathway, hotter, severe, and destructive. We need to push for a human right-based approach to the environment and to promote climate justice. The right to a healthy environment has the potential to make a difference, but many are still in denial. The upshot of this is that over 90% of the world's urban population is still breathing unsafe air, which accounts for millions of premature deaths each year, including thousands of children. Climate change is seriously impacting agriculture, especially in Africa, and thus exacerbating hunger, impacting those who are already vulnerable. Excellencies, human rights must remain at the center of our efforts to promote peace and security and advance the right to development, including the SDGs. Let us move our world forward with and for human rights. Let us continue to fight the battle, make the case for human equality, human dignity, and human rights for one and all, but with a heavy dose of empathy. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Today, obviously, the word advancing on the women empowerment and gender parity, but there are many things to achieve. We are yet very far from the achievements. We are not seeing the actual advancement in the political arena, although there are many leaders like you had been achieved individually. It's an individual efforts. I will say it's not a collective efforts. If today the Estonia is having this unique progress, that the head of a state and a head of government both are a woman, then this is the unique thing toward the gender parity and women empowerment. But I would like that the word should change, that there will be, if there is a president, uh, a male, then the female should be a prime minister, or either the prime minister should be a male or president should be a female. So this will cause the gender parity, and we will advance for the human rights, and all insecurities, whatever the world is facing, it will be definitely addressed on that time, when we will be having an equal responsibility of each other, because one power dominate, the other power feel the oppression. So that oppression should be ended on all level of our governmental, non-governmental, family or societal levels. Thank you very much, Madam President. Now I would like to introduce His Excellency Mr. Rui Dato Barros. He is the former Prime Minister of the Republic of Guinea-Bissau. He is the life member of the International Human Rights Commission. He is the one and unique person who has restored the democracy in the Guinea-Bissau. He was the person who had given a chance to their own peoples to taste the democracy, how the democracy works. His Excellency Prime Minister Mr. Rui Dato Barros, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Doctor. Your Excellency, high personality of this summit, the authorities of Pakistan, Dr. Muhammad Saeed Amin Khan, Ambassador, and the World Chairman of the International Human Rights Commission, all the participants in the summit. Thank the member of the board of the International Human Rights Commission for inviting me to take part in this event with eminent personalities of the world to discuss about together we have the power to reshape the world, new prosperous world for humanity, with important sub-themes to be analyzed. I'm very impressed for the work that the International Human Rights Commission is doing in the field of human rights protection. And today, International Human Rights Commission, as an intergovernmental organization, is become an important actor of dialogue fighting for peace in the world. I will focus my keynote on peace, justice, security, and development. Peace, justice, security, and development. It is increasingly recognized that there exists a relationship between peace, justice, security, and development. Peace and justice influence a country's development process. Development provides well-being to the population. A country that experiences no economic, social, and social development cannot claim welfare and justice and human rights. These factors are interrelated, which means ensuring national peace, justice, and security in order to support the development process that leads to social being. Some examples of security threats to nation for peace. International and internal terrorism, like in my continent, in Sahel, Somalia, Mali, Libya, Niger, etc., etc. Climate risk, no water, no land. Organized crime, fraud, drugs, money laundering, piracy, hostage taking, human trafficking. Food security, war and displacement caused by conflicts. There are some causes that menace peace and justice. When a state finds internal territory to control all activity, dictatorial regime, a country whose governmental system is dictatorial or totalitarian, deprive its population from their right and they prevent freedom of expression. Injustice, exclusion, discrimination, and corruption. A state engaged in such practice cause disorders and secessions, rebellion, and the coup d'etat attempts. These are countries where the population does not trust its leaders. Political instability, economic and financial difficulties. A country whose economy is bad will struggle to confront the population discontent. Economic difficulty might be felt in commodity security and the rising price. And today, our continent is facing the problem of COVID-19 that is very difficult to find vaccine, to pay for vaccine for the population. And the rivalries between ethnic groups, different religions, beliefs, and ideologies. Last, election-related violence, pre-elections, during the elections, post-elections, examples in Kenya, Burundi, Central Africa, etc., etc. How to address those problems of insecurity and build the peace and the justice? First, strengthening good governance, which means efficiency of institutions, transparency, accountability, inclusion, and participations. Democratization, second, to ensure freedom, respect for human rights, dignity, creativity, trust, and mutual respect. Third, improving life condition of population, human and social security of people, creating jobs, infrastructures, promoting business, economic development, economic growth, enable government to implement programs and projects, economic activity, make countries able to meet social needs of the population. And what should be the role of International Human Rights Commission to prevent and end the conflicts and bring peace and justice? Today, we need to innovate and find new tools to understand the problems of our times in order to prevent some conflict that can menace the peace in the world. As an institution, the International Human Rights Commission can play a very important role in preventing conflicts by promoting dialogue between people, communities based on some principles. So, understand its philosophy, we can bring together key forces, process, institutions involved in the peace building and the reconciliation in order to contribute for enhancing dialogue and building confidence to solve some conflicts in order to bring peace. Tomorrow begins today. Today, the global crisis that the world is to, and we must to take immediate actions. Young people can play an important role in promoting culture of peace and non-violence. Thanks for your attention, and I wish a great success to the summit. Thank you.
Thank you, Excellency Prime Minister. You are always vocal because you have given the voice to the youth in Guinea-Bissau, and I wish that I can welcome you in person. As we see the time is running out of hand, and I will see you as my guest in Pakistan as well, because a long time we have never seen you in person. Now, ladies and gentlemen and excellencies, now it is the time to hear from one important person. There is no he, there is no she. She is the voice of a women empowerment. She is a voice of the peace. She is the voice of the international diplomacy. I'm giving the floor to Her Excellency Maria Fernanda Espinosa, the President of the 73rd United Nations General Assembly, former Minister of Foreign Affairs and Defense of Ecuador. The floor is yours, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Excellency Ambassador Mohammed Sahid Amin Khan. And of course, thank you to the International Human Rights Commission for hosting this World Summit. My greetings to all the distinguished panelists. And of course, I think this World Summit this year gathers around a message of solidarity and hope. And this title of "Together we have the power to build a more prosperous world for humanity." And as a strong advocate for multilateralism, I could not agree more, Ambassador, with that statement. For it is now perhaps more than ever that we need to revamp collective action on the basis of global solidarity to recover from the multidimensional crises that the COVID-19 pandemic has unleashed. As we have heard from other speakers, we are living a time of multidimensional crises. Today's societies, countries, regions, and are increasingly interdependent and interconnected. And this has brought extraordinary flux of information, of technology, of goods, and unprecedented material wealth. But at the same time, the paradox is that we are living this multidimensional crisis consisting in armed conflicts, violations of human rights, forced displacement, disasters, poverty and inequality, epidemics, and economic downturns. And these structural challenges go beyond borders, and we know that. And that puts, and this is really putting the prospects of peace, of stability, of upholding human rights into questions. And I think that the current health, humanitarian, and socioeconomic crisis caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, and we know the numbers are terrifying. 110 million people infected worldwide, and a death toll of 2.46 million people, together with the global economic contraction of minus 3.5% of total GDP loss in 2020 only. And this, of course, is going to decrease access to jobs. 114 million people lost their jobs only last year. And I think this is the clearest example of the scope and magnitude of the global risks that we are facing as we speak. I would like to focus my remarks on a crucial aspect of the post-COVID recovery efforts and the Building Back Better our world. And this is the need to advance in the provision of global public goods, such as universal health coverage. The COVID pandemic, I think, has made it crystal clear that markets cannot replace the role of the state in guaranteeing universal basic access to public services. And I think this has been one of the big and important teachings of what we are living today. One of the key lessons from the pandemic is the need of robust, well-funded public health systems and universal health coverage. In this context, the notion of the public, of the commons, has taken a new meaning and centrality in policy choices and investment. Even in the most liberal democracies, the COVID-19 crisis has also shown the need of a greater solidarity and greater social discipline towards protocols, restriction, and community responses. So here we have much to learn, for example, from indigenous peoples and African and Asian countries where communal values are stronger than in Western societies. In Africa, for example, and there are many representatives here, at the outbreak of the COVID-19, the African Union deployed a joint response based on solidarity. They created a common fund to raise resources to support a pool procurement of diagnostics and other medical commodities to mitigate the impacts of the crisis. Another example, the 15 East Asian and Pacific member countries of the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership have managed to control the pandemic using measures such as lockdowns, mobility restrictions, physical distancing, testing, and quarantine, but in cooperation, in exchanging good practices, in strengthening cooperation, concerted action. And unfortunately, despite these examples, the international cooperation and communal discipline, we have also, unfortunately, witnessed a more general tendency towards the adoption of unilateral and nationalistic responses to fight the COVID-19 pandemic. And here we have what I call the vaccine disasters, because as former president of Ecuador was mentioning, 75% of COVID-19 vaccines have been administered in only 10 countries, while other 130 countries have not yet received a single dose. So here we have a strong show of inequality, of the need for greater sharing and cooperation as well. So just to close, I think that we have learned in the past months the importance of universal health coverage as fundamental for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And we have also learned that we need to consider that public is back. Public services such as health and education should be at the forefront of the measures against the crisis. And finally, I think that we have also learned that we need to build back better tooling of the United Nations. The process of reform of the UN organs that the UN Secretary General is leading as we speak should count with the support of all international stakeholders in order to provide the world with a revamped multilateral architecture that delivers global commons, leaving no one behind. I think that the COVID-19 related crises are in essence a human rights crisis, as we have heard this morning. And these multiple crises affect our democracies and the delivery of the Sustainable Development Goals. We know what to do to contain the pandemic. We even know how to do it. The question is who is going to do it? And we are part of the who. Any response or alternative has to come from the whole of society, from us, from women. And of course, each one of us has a different role to play. But leadership is critical at this juncture, especially at the global level. And I would close by thanking again the conveners of this summit. Thank you, and back to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you very much, Excellency President. Your valuable time has also given our policymakers in Pakistan, while you was in first time, you was on the visit of Pakistan for 2 days, and the people have heard your valuable thoughts as the President of the United Nations General Assembly. We think that you've been very much instrumental for the equality, parity, and also human rights. And obviously, at this moment, your country is facing the problem of the democratic institution, and we wish that every country will having a strengthened democracy today and tomorrow. Let us conclude with other guests. I am going to invite the one and only the person of a democracy. Still in this age, he is fighting, and he is fighting for the people's rights and for the people's development. the empowering their own peoples into their country. Although that country is a very small country for the world, but very strong country because of the mountains. And the highest mountain in the world is belongs to that country. His Excellency Mr. Jalnath Khanal, the 35 Prime Minister of the Nepal, he is uh, also a co-president of the World Youth Summit for Peace, and hopefully the pandemic will end and he will come to attend the summit once again. His Excellency, the Prime Minister Jalnath Khanal, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Can you hear, Excellency?
Yes, we are hearing you, Mr. Prime Minister.
Okay. Good evening, everybody. Your Excellency, Ambassador Dr. Mohammed Saeed Amin Khan, World Chair, and the distinguished guest in the World Summit 2021 of the International Human Rights Commission. I would immensely like to appreciate Your Excellency, the World Chair of the International Commission of Human Rights, personally, as well as the International Human Rights Commission itself, for inviting me to the summit and giving me this opportunity to address the World Summit 2000. Distinguished keynote speakers, excellencies, delegates, and participants from across the world. As we all are aware, the year 2020 has just passed with the terror of the COVID-19 pandemic, with its aftershocks continued as of now. The health, education, economy, and many more vital affairs of the modern human world faced immense challenges and traumas. Our children have yet been facing anxieties about their future. Our economies have suffered heavily, thus pushing the poor people into a further difficult situation. Most gruesomely, thousands of people have lost their precious lives, with impacts that are all visible before us. The pandemic appeared as a dangerous violator of human rights in the 21st century against the right to life. The chaos and disorder unleashed by this pandemic shattered many important efforts of the international community as well as national governments to transform human lives into social and economic better conditions and ending poverty. However, despite all those hardships and evil impacts of the pandemic, the global human society, international community, and national governments and citizens have not yet given up the hopes for a better time to come with recovery of losses. Although the challenges have multiplied, we all have strong confidence and hopes that we would move forward for a bit with a few spirit of international cooperation and support and mutual collaboration between individual nations. The pandemic has forced us to deeply ponder upon the weaknesses of the prevailing world seriously. This has put before us a reality and conviction that the world is interconnected for every sphere of human life and development affairs. It has tangibly taught us a lesson that no nation and no individual is fully competent to address the crisis of the time posed by this technology achieved by a single nation is not capable to protect its citizens' lives and the environment of better health. It has shown us that no one is able enough to face such crises alone, thus showing that every nation has to seek cooperation from other for building safety of people's life and prosperity globally. The crisis has tension and power competition is vital for the safety of people and key for the lasting continuity of humanity and its civilization. Most importantly, we have learned that our civilizations and progress are mutually dependent, and so we should not clash and compete against each other. Dear delegates, our challenges for economic prosperity have been added. The loss the world has suffered in smooth economic rise at national as well as the international level is likely to push more people into a trap of poverty due to loss of job, negative impacts in international markets, mobility, and most importantly, loss of production capacity. The negative impact on the economy will have results in investment in education, health, and environmental protection sectors. These impacts will ultimately have negative effects on actions needed a smooth march of the world towards better prosperity. Our trades and commerce may suffer harshly and unhealthily. Globalization may spread out. In this situation, the developing countries where a large part of the poor population lives may suffer more. Hence, the world human rights concern must stand not only to champion the causes of human rights at the individual level, but ought also to concentrate on constructing more just and equitable globalization by fostering responsibility of developed and stronger economies to invigorate the weaker and smaller economies across the world. This proposal includes added facilities and concessions from the developed and strong economies in international trade to the smaller and weaker economies. Hence, in the post-pandemic situation, this is a time for the human rights movement to inseparably be elaborately to connect with the world economy to the direction of new globalization. A strategy to connect the world by innovative collaboration efforts is thus indispensable. Excellencies, it has been a belief in South Asia based on lasting wisdom generated by our forefathers that the crisis is faced boldly with a cool head. There has been a wise saying that good birds choose good trees to rest. The crisis should teach us more wisdom for collaboration. We have come to a stage to think that the human rights movement must direct its efforts for international justice by making nations, policies, and development efforts more rational and humanly. Human rights missions and development missions must conjoin to produce a better world and proximity among people, nations, culture, and civilizations. Most importantly, the mission for human right enhancement leading to the goal of the protection of human right beings must unleash a pearl of new wisdom to connect, unite the world without hatred to ideologies, civilizations, and histories of societies. Asia in the past has produced immense wisdom in that direction, which is full of human rights, values, and milestones. I am therefore very hopeful that the 21st World Summit of the International Human Rights Commission will be able to set forth a rich departure to the new world with human rights missions and movements connected with the prosperity of the millions of poor people of the world. I have a sincere hope that the summit will come with concrete ideas and projects to enhance the human rights agenda to be connected with international justice based on international economic cooperation. Human rights must provide a basis for cooperation among nations and should be a guiding principle for orientation of world affairs. The world to make it a rational, dependent. I would like to express my sincere thanks for an opportunity to voice my concerns and expectations regarding human rights and wish a successful completion of the summit with yields of new ideas, fostering a new, just, and rational globe guided by a principle of human rights and economic development fully interconnected. Let us face the pandemic and its aftershocks united with the spirit of human rights, motivating the course of global economic prosperity to end the poverty. Thank you very much, Excellency.
Thank you very much, Excellency Prime Minister. As I said that you are fighting for the democracy in Nepal, you are very much vocal for the human rights as our Southeast Asian countries are facing, and I really admire. On behalf of the international community that you are contributing in the midst of the pandemic. You are contributing your all efforts and energies for strengthening the democracy in Nepal, and our wishes are with you, and soon we will see you that you will be leading the country and coming to us again in Pakistan as a leader of SAARC. Ladies and gentlemen, now it is a time that I should give a floor to the Vice President of the Republic of Somaliland, His Excellency Mr. Abdurrahman Salesi. He is the 5th Vice President and sitting Vice President of the Somaliland, a person who is fighting for the human rights, respect of democracy, and equality into her own country and for the right of self-determination. His Excellency Vice President, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you, Your Excellency, former presidents, prime ministers, ambassadors, parliamentarians, distinguished justice, all those honorable professionals, ladies and gentlemen. First and foremost, I would like to extend a warm welcome to all of you participating in this important World Human Rights Summit organized by the International Human Rights Commission. My name is Abdurrahman Abdullah Ismail. I'm the Vice President of Somaliland Republic. Those of you who may have never heard of history of Somaliland, let me give you a very short brief on the history of my country. Following more than 8. Do you hear me?
Yes, Mr. President, we are hearing you.
Yes. Okay, someone has interfered us. So, let me give you a very short historical context about my country. Following more than 8 years of British colonial rule, the former British Somaliland Protectorate gained its independence on 26 June 1960. Just 5 days later, on 1st July 1960, it gave up its statehood and formed voluntarily with former Italian Somalia to create the unitary state of Somali Republic. Despite early hopefulness associated with the independence and nation rule in the process of unification, the rules-based integration between the two states proved to be a failure by any measure. The voluntary union of Somali Republic has caused nothing else but repression, injustice, destruction, and lost lives of many Somaliland peoples. Since our withdrawal from 1960, voluntary union with Somali Italian on May 18, 1991, after the collapse of Somali central government, Somalia has succeeded to provide the country's inhabitants to enjoy a mature reconciliation process and brotherly environment in which they live side by side in peace and harmony. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, historically, legally, and politically, Somalia has a unique case for seeking and demanding tireless international cooperation, despite the distractions created by the former dictator regime of Somalia. How Somaliland pulled it off from the despair situation is an impressive accomplishment and a real testament for the resolve and resilient nature of the people of Somaliland. Somaliland and human rights situation. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the compliance and full protection of all aspects of human rights issues is not only deeply enshrined in the Somaliland constitution, but it is also the religious and moral duty of everyone in our society, including those elected by the people and those in charge of state powers. Contrary to the parties of the will, the Republic of Somaliland has an independent and strong human rights commission that actively monitors, reports, and implements all possible human rights violations. Regardless of the degree and frequency these violations may occur. Somaliland Human Rights Commission conducted its activity and investigations into human rights violations without any hindrance, interference, or distractions from state apparatus. This means that the Commission is completely free and independent to carry out its duty and present its fact findings to the public, to the relevant government authorities, and to the international human rights partners. With regard to the protection of human rights, fundamental civic rights, as well as adhering to universal agreements and protocols, I can say with a great certainty that the Republic of Somaliland has made a wonderful progress, particularly wonderful progress. However, I believe that there are still a lot of things to be improved, in particularly in the area of women's and minority rights, their active involvement and especially in political decision-making process, but also holding senior positions in the legislative branch still needs some more improvement. The nature of Somaliland's political party landscape is defined by the nature of its constitution. Somaliland has three political party systems. They are democratic, peaceful, multi-party system, where the president and the vice president run on a joint ticket. Parliamentary and district councils are directly elected by registered voters through the secret ballot every 5 years. Somaliland firmly recognizes that multi-party political system and democratic norms can significantly contribute to improving and upholding of human rights aspects. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Somaliland has held 6 times peaceful, fair, and international monetary elections. The ever-growing commitment of the Somaliland people and their leaders to a democratic form of parties cannot easily be questioned or ignored. To ignore what Somaliland people has achieved would be morally incorrect and send a strong message to those peoples and nations aspiring to realize and live one day under democratic norms, values, and way of governance. Despite the fact Somaliland is not yet officially recognized by the world community, more than a quarter of a century, Somaliland has demonstrated an active engagement and commitment to international peace and security affairs. Ever since, the Republic of Somaliland has been a reliable international partner for fighting against human rights violation, disparities, extremism, organized crimes, and global human trafficking. In this regard, Somaliland cooperates closely with the EU, UK, USA, and many other countries. This circumstance has certainly attracted a lot of attention from the outside world, whereby potential investors and development partners are daring and flocking to invest in Somaliland. An example thereof is, among others, the DB well post management. Finally, we talk about human rights today, individual rights on this summit. I would like to point out that 5 million Somalilanders are still seeking their collective basic aspects to be recognized as an independent country among the world community. Thank you very much for your attention. It's a great honor and privilege for me to participate this important human rights summit. Especially, I want to thank to Mr. Mohammed Khan.
Thank you very much, Excellency Vice President. International Human Rights Commission is a very much vocal for the rights and freedom to
شكلك
the
مالي
people of
ومن كده كمان
Somaliland needed at this
يا
moment.
صنعاني كم
Mr. Vice President, thank you very much for your valuable remarks and valuable time. And I will go to the next speaker, our keynote speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, forgive me, I am trying to give a gender parity between the all participants. And I'm trying very much because of some interruption in the starting has brought us a little bit late. Now I'm giving the floor to the Honorary President of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, Congresswoman of Mexico, Her Excellency Mrs. Gabriela Canvas Baron. She's one of the vocal person. Couple of months ago, she been in Pakistan for her last leg as a president of the Inter-Parliamentary Union. The People's Parliamentarian of Pakistan, they are considering her a nightingale of democracy and institution of democracy. So, Madam President, floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this very kind invitation. I would like to thank the International Human Rights Commission and, of course, to you, Ambassador, because I think that this conversation is very much needed. We need to understand that this World Summit and speaking about human rights is a must during and, of course, after the pandemic. It is of great concern to see that democracy is suffering significant setbacks across the world. Just as an unprecedented health crisis has tested our governments and endurance of societies, the 2020 Democracy Index, published by the Economist Intelligence Unit, has shown the worst results ever since the index was first published in 2006. The scenes that we witnessed in the US Capitol earlier this year have made it clear democracy cannot be taken for granted. Moreover, while it is true that swift and decisive government action is needed in times of crisis, such as the one we are currently living through due to the pandemic, this should not lead to the institutionalization of authoritarian practices and the reversal of hard-earned progress towards democracy, only attained after much struggle and sacrifice in many countries. And this is why parliaments are vital, because it is not only about how to address the health crisis or the economic recovery, or of course, the climate change. It is also about how we would like to have democracy and human rights now and after the pandemic. Parliaments are tasked with the oversight of the exercise of government authority and with representing the interests voiced by their constituents. As such, it is up to parliaments to challenge any abuse that could bring harm on citizens and maintain democracies alive. I am certain that if parliamentarians uphold their responsibilities, democracy will not falter. It will only grow stronger and prosper even more. This summit is a momentous occasion to underline that the nature of democracy enables the defense of human rights, an element that is needed to foster inclusion and representation in our communities. And this is a strong reason to advocate for. Now I have another hat. I am not only the honorary president of the Inter-Parliamentary Union, I was just elected a couple of weeks ago as the co-chair of the steering committee of Universal Health Coverage 2030, UHC 2030. And this is, I think, also a very important responsibility in a very important time. When we talk about the pandemic, and I think that a year ago we were hoping for the year to understand the lessons of the pandemic, we thought A year ago that we were appreciating how the skies were blue and how we were seeing fishes in Italy or animals in the British parks. But now I think, and I would like to question if the world has really understood the lessons of the pandemic. Are we really practicing solidarity? Are we really committed to human rights? I must say that I don't think so. I am not sure that the humanity has learned the lessons because, for example, if we see how vaccines are distributed in the world, well, honestly, the vaccines are being distributed only in very few countries. That's not a world project. That's not a public good that we were talking perhaps about 8 months ago. And I think that here we need to understand that the bottom line is political will. We need political will when it comes to rebuilding trust. We need political will when it comes to achieve universal health coverage. We need political will when it comes to strengthen democracy and respect human rights. And we're supposed to be celebrating a lot of very important moments for humanity. And one is that we are still celebrating the 25th anniversary of the United Nations. And what we should be learning are those same reasons, those same circumstances that made UN possible 75 years ago. And it was to understand that the world needs multilateral answers. The world needs multilateral cooperation, that we need solidarity. We need to be organized at the world level in order to change the local challenges and to bring people the solutions that are very much needed. So now, as my biggest responsibility is precisely to be advocating for universal health coverage, I would like to use this opportunity to remind all of us that health is a human right, and that if we do not work hard enough, by 2030, 5 billion people are not going to have basic access to health. So this is a moment where, as a parliamentarian myself, but also as a politician for a very long time, I think that what we need is political will, is passion for change, is passion to make this world a better one. And we need to learn the lessons from the pandemic. We need to understand, my case as a parliamentarian, that we need a better legislation, that we need to allocate budget, that we need to work with the government, but at the same time to make the governments accountable when it comes to all these different crises that we're living. Again, health, economic recovery, climate change. Of course, we need a feminist and sustainable recovery. There's a lot of things that we need to do. But I think that the first step is to understand that we need a democratic recovery and that we need to put first and always human rights as the basic responsibility for a parliamentarian, not only for ourselves, but for those who are living in a constitutional regime or in a democratic country. We understand how difficult, how hard it was to fight for human rights. This is the moment where humanity is having a lot of important crises. And I am not sure that we are able to speak about them openly, that we are able to question those regimes, those governments that are continuously violating human rights. Again, we are having a very important and complicated moment for humanity. I am sure that we can build back better, as the UN Secretary General has said many, many times, that we can fight climate change, that we can make vaccines a real public good for all humanity, but we need political will. And I really hope that this summit will change a lot of hearts and make us collaborate better and closer. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for this invitation.
Your Excellency, I am and my colleagues all are honored because of your presence. I stressed you many times to be a part of this summit, because when I talk to the parliamentarians, as I mentioned in my intro for you, that you are a nightingale for the democracy and democratic institution. Obviously, we all understand that this pandemic has taught us so many things. Our weaknesses, our systems weaknesses, it exposed everything, our lies, our political differences, and also during this pandemic we have seen the very worst attack on a democracy and democratic institution, not only in one country, in many countries, and still we are facing it. I am very much aware that we have to have, it's our responsibility, collective responsibility, that we have to strengthen the institution, as the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres has said many times, but as well as we have to educate our people, those who are contributing very importantly in our democracies, to choose a wise leadership, choose clean leadership, choose a feminist leadership for the equality on all levels. So that will I hope the change will bring the change. As you know that this pandemic is related to the climate crisis which the whole humanity and planet is facing. It's the we who made it this planet as a hell for ourselves and for our coming generation. And now it is our responsibility to give a hand to each other to bring back this planet on the track, bring back the humanity on the track. And this is the collective responsibility that the all institution has to accept and do. Thank you very much for your valuable time and for your valuable remarks, and I want to hear some other times more from you, and hopefully when the pandemic is giving us a time, we will invite you once again to taste the hospitality of my country and to taste the democracy of our country. Thank you, Madam Patel. Now the floor is given to the person, freedom fighter, and I will say that he is the one that who has cried many times for the people, those who are facing oppression. None other than the Secretary General of the International Human Rights Commission, Ambassador Malak Nadeem Abed. The floor is yours, sir.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of Allah, the most merciful, the most beneficent. First of all, I'm thankful to His Excellency Ambassador Shahid Amin Khan, the World Chairman, and the entire team for their strong support for me to manage day-to-day operations of International Secretariat in New York. I'm thankful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all His blessings, mercies, and bounties. I'm going to refer to a few comments made by earlier learned guests. And then, of course, I'll briefly express my personal opinion as well. Her Excellency, President Rosalia Arteaga, she mentioned very passionately, and I totally agree with her, that vaccine is also becoming, very strongly becoming a part of the public corruption and the corruption of the Western world. Very unfortunate that the Western world and some of the corporate sector of the Western world is still trying to make billions of dollars by selling this vaccines and trying to control the third world countries and their people trying to keep them away from the healthy lifestyle. I think that United Nations and its Secretary General, Honorable Antonio Guterres, a wonderful, wonderful leader. He has to take the lead in this matter as well and make sure that the vaccine is made available to all the countries in the world, regardless of their financial status and regardless of whether they can pay or whether they can afford to pay or not. These Western words, I understand, living in America, I totally understand and I agree that our people in the United States have the right to get the vaccine first. But after having vaccinated most of the population in America, at least then we should offer the vaccine to the African, Asian, and all developing countries free of charge as a goodwill to the rest of the world. The public corruption, I don't see Her Excellency President Akiaga here. Looks like she has other engagements, but I'm sure she will listen to this recording as well or watch the video. The public corruption is also supported by the Western world. And how they support it? Because what happens is when the third world countries' leaders do the public corruption, they steal the money of their own people, their own countries, and to Switzerland, to America, to UK, all these countries, they welcome this stolen money from the third world countries. I think there has to be another declaration, just like a Universal Declaration of Human Rights. We should have a universal declaration of anti-corruption and anti-money laundering, that no country will ever allow a mass transaction of the money from third world countries unless it is supported by the documentation of halal or kosher or legal money. So that's the only way we can control the fraud and corruption. What a beautiful conversation, what a beautiful speech by Her Excellency President Fakim of Mauritius. She very beautifully said that human rights are only words unless we have respect for the human beings. So one of the only document unanimously adopted by the United Nations in its history was Universal Declaration of Human Rights. What a beautiful document. It still needs to be implemented fully. And again, I admire Secretary General of United Nations and his leadership, Secretary General Antonio Guterres. He is a very passionate person. He has to take very strong steps to implement this and make sure that the world powers also support him in implementation of this declaration. One more thing, which Her Excellency Dr. Fakim said, the women are facing violence. Who else can express this more than people who are under foreign occupation? My own home state of Kashmir is under occupation, illegal occupation by India for the last 74 years. And I would strongly urge all the participants to Google it, to see what's going on in Indian occupied Kashmir. In the modern history, nowhere in the modern history you see so many horrible, horrible atrocities committed by the occupying forces compared to what Indian army is doing in Kashmir. More than 10,000 women are raped by Indian army in last 30 years. More than 10,000. And I know all of us, and I know all of you have one woman or one girl you love from depth of your heart. Could be your mother, could be your grandmother, your wife, your sister, your daughter. Just put yourself for 1 minute in the shoes of the people of Kashmir. A young girl leaving for the school in the morning does not have assurance or guarantee to come back alive and with dignity and respect. A woman leaving for the work does not have the guarantee of coming back alive or with dignity. Even women staying at home do not have the same guarantee or assurance. Ladies and gentlemen, the occupation forces, they break into people's homes. They kidnap women and girls. They torture them, they rape them, and they throw their torn bodies into the rivers. Just a coincidence. Yesterday, February 23rd, was the 30th anniversary of an incident which qualifies to be a slap on the face of the human right, slap on the face of the humanity, a shame for the humanity. February 3rd, 1991, the cover of search operations, Indian Army's units, they cordoned off 2 twin villages in the remote area of Indian occupied Kashmir. They raped each and every girl and a woman in those twin villages. Youngest victim was 13 years old, and oldest victim was 67 years old. We talked today about implementation of judicial system or justice system. Ladies and gentlemen, these women and children and girls from Kunan and Poshpora, and I strongly urge you all again to Google the incidents of Kunan and Poshpora in Indian occupied Kashmir, 23rd February 1991. Many of those victims have died, gang rape by an occupation force, Indian Army. Many of them have died. And rest of them, they are still waiting for justice to be served. Out of all those atrocities faced by people in Kashmir, not even one single person has been brought to justice by the Indian justice system that calls itself to be the world's largest democracy. How can we do it to humanity? Just put yourself 1 minute for the shoes of a Kashmiri woman who's been gang raped in front of her family. In 2018, February 2018, an 8-year-old girl from South Kashmir, 2 mobs, taken to a Hindu temple, a mandir, gang raped for 10 days, 8-year-old girl, gang raped for 8 days, tortured, and after 8 days, her torn body was thrown in a jungle. This is what the life is under occupation of the world's most brutal army, Indian Army. People of Kashmir were promised in 1948 and almost every year since then that they will be given the right to self-determination. Both India and Pakistan are the major parties in this conflict. Being people of Kashmir the major party, India and Pakistan agreed to this, and India actually suggested that the right to self-determination will be given to people of Kashmir. We are still waiting for this promise to be honored. Please raise your voice. In 2019, after India revoked the special status of Kashmir, the Honorable Secretary General of United Nations, Antonio Guterres, and after that as well, he strongly expressed his support of the right to self-determination for people of Kashmir, and he said the resolution the final resolution of Kashmir conflict will be done in accordance with the UN resolutions. Unfortunately, despite the fact that he is the most loyal and the most sincere leader of the United Nations, just like the Honorable Chairman said, but the world powers are not supporting him. All those countries who signed the resolutions, who supported the resolutions of right to self-determination for people of Kashmir, they are not supporting the right to self-determination now. Please write to your presidents, write to your prime ministers, write to the media, and write to the Secretary General of Honorable Secretary General of United Nations to not to forget the people of Kashmir. There are many other issues faced by the world today. Climate change. I have a 10-year-old daughter. My own president, ex-president, said there is nothing wrong with the climate. My daughter, 10-year-old daughter, last year in an event in school was explaining to her schoolmates how the climate is impacting the whole world, the animals, the human beings, and everyone. And again, that is human rights. Women empowerment. How can we empower women if the women of people of Kashmir are treated the way they are treated by the Indian Army? Conflict and healthcare. Again, just like I mentioned earlier, the vaccine and the provision of vaccine to COVID-19 victims must be treated as a human right, and the vaccine must be provided to the rest of the world free of charge by the Western world. One more important thing, which Honorable President of the General Assembly, 73rd President of the General Assembly, Maria Fernanda Espinosa said, 110 million people affected by COVID-19, 2.46 million people died, 114 million people lost their jobs, and we are trying to make money out of selling the vaccine. This is not right. This is a clear violation of the human rights of the whole world. We need to step up and we need to fight back. And the International Human Rights Commission is taking the lead in all this fight, but we need your support. We need you to please step up and support us morally, politically, diplomatically, and even if you can support financially, we need your support. Once again, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, for your support, your confidence, and the support from the entire team. God bless you all. God bless America. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary General. You are very much vocal. You are very much vocal in the term of human rights, and I am in view that we all should. It's our collective responsibility that we all should stand for the human rights. No matter it's a matter of Kashmir, it's a matter of Western Sahara, it's a matter of Belarus nowadays. No matter the democracy is a fragile in Africa, in Asia, now in Europe too. We are going to listen. Everyone, those who are contributing their collective wisdom for the crisis we are facing. Today, this summit is not just a summit. It is a collective bargaining responsibility of all of us that we are sharing with each other.